Wellness Warriors. Welcome to the Burnout Resolution Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mylaine Riobé. I'm a board-certified medical doctor with areas of expertise in integrative functional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, as well as OBGYN. So I bring a mix of 3 different systems of medicine to all of my evaluations and podcasts. Women are often shocked when I tell them that menopause and perimenopause don't actually have any symptoms. All of the things that women experience around the time that we call perimenopause, and certainly around the time of menopause, such as hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, anxiety, weight gain, mood swings, are actually not part of perimenopause or menopause. And we'll talk about what they actually are a part of today, so that you can begin to understand why when you go to the doctor and you complain about these symptoms, everything's always normal at the end of the day when the blood work is done and all the other evaluations. This came to light this week when I was following a popular Instagram thread where this poor woman who has this amazing channel shared with her audience and viewers that she was experiencing perimenopause symptoms. And she went to her doctor, who then referred her to her gynecologist, which then referred her to a hormone specialist, who then ran blood work and told her that everything was normal and that there was nothing he could do. He referred her back to her gynecologist. And so at the end of the day, she said that she broke down in tears in her car after that evaluation and that her heart just sank because she knew something was wrong. And yet everything and everyone was telling her everything was fine. Now there were I can't remember how many comments there were on this thread, but I want to say that there are about 3,000 comments or more, full of misconceptions and misplaced blame. So today, we're going to talk about perimenopause and menopause and why millions of women are exactly in the situation as this poor woman was when she was breaking down crying in her car. And they don't get any help because doctors are afraid to prescribe hormones. And we weren't taught how to evaluate for menopause or perimenopause syndromes. We use a standard of blood work, which is simply ineffective, and then we tell people that they're just getting older and that they just have to suck it up. So I commented in the thread as a functional medical doctor and advised her to seek the care of a functional medical doctor, and we'll talk about why throughout the podcast, and to also have salivary hormone testing done. We'll talk about why saliva is the gold standard and what studies are beginning to show us very clearly is wrong with blood work, and why we should be looking at salivary levels for hormones. Now, I don't know where my comment's going to end up in those 3,000 comments, but I do hope she finds the help that she needs. So today we're going to dive deep into perimenopause and menopause. We're going to dispel all the myths and misconceptions, many of them that I saw in the comment threads, some of them even from doctors. What's really going on in the case of these symptoms is something completely different than perimenopause and menopause. But they happen to occur around the time of menopause, which makes people think that, again, the last thing that's going on when my symptoms started must be the cause of my symptoms. And so we keep blaming menopause on perimenopause and menopause symptoms, when in fact they are not responsible. We shouldn't even know we're going into menopause. We should not know that menopause is around the corner and have all these crazy symptoms happening. The only way we should know that menopause is around the corner is if we know our own age, right? The average age of menopause is 51 and a half. That should be the only warning that menopause is around the corner. So if you have any signs or symptoms, they're not normal and they're not part of perimenopause or menopause. We see people in their 30s now. 55% of women between the age of 30 and 35 report perimenopause symptoms. Now, it can't be that menopause is starting at the age of 30. And so something else is going on that we're missing. The entire medical community is missing it. Certainly patients are missing it because we're not educated on what menopause is supposed to be. We have this idea that we're supposed to be suffering through it all the time, when that's just not the case. So in the comment threads, I saw some people were suggesting that their naturopath said that they should treat based on symptoms and not blood work. Other people commented that it was because the doctor was a male and that she should see a female doctor because they understand their symptoms better. And they're not wrong necessarily that female doctors can empathize much more, especially if they've already gone through that as most of us have. However, these are all misplaced blame, and we should not treat perimenopause or menopause symptoms based on the symptoms themselves. We'll talk about why today. Now, perimenopause and menopause is a clinical diagnosis, so it is true that you will not diagnose perimenopause with blood work. It's a clinical diagnosis that we make roughly around the ages of 44 into the 50s, where women start to complain of hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, anxiety. The blood work is usually normal. We don't expect to find anything, but we base it on the clinical signs and the symptoms expressed to us by the client. Now, we're not supposed to see this start in the 30s, which is what we're beginning to see. More than half of women are beginning to stretch perimenopause out to 30, and that's just not normal. That's not perimenopause. So the diagnosis is clinical, but the treatment should not be clinical in terms of being based on symptoms alone. The answer for that is hormones have a lot of overlapping functions. So if you look up the functions of cortisol, for example, and compare it to the functions of thyroid, you'll see that there is a lot of overlap. They both run metabolism, they both manage blood sugar, they both manage inflammation, they both control your immune system. So you can't tell if there's a symptom. For example, if you're catching colds all the time or you're gaining weight, you can't assume that it's thyroid or cortisol because they can both cause those symptoms. And you also can't assume that it's because your hormone levels are too high or too low that you're having a symptom. It's not true that hot flashes are only caused by low estrogen. We see this all the time. We test people using salivary tests and see that sometimes the estrogen isn't actually low, it's actually high, and that the cells are overrun with estrogen because the cell's detoxification systems are not functioning. You can also have hot flashes because of high cortisol, high thyroid, high estrogen, low progesterone, or low estrogen. And so there's no way to guess based on symptoms. It's impossible. Now, there is a way you can mask symptoms with hormones. There's a way that you can give so much estrogen that it masks everything else that's going on. But that's not safe to do, because if the problem is that you're not breaking the estrogen down well and you're taking more and more and more to mask the symptom, then we can see how we can run into trouble. Too much estrogen is not safe. And it's not that it's the estrogen that's making it unsafe, it's the inability to break the estrogen down properly that's the danger. When you're not breaking your estrogen down properly, it gets recirculated into your body in toxic form. And it's that toxic form of estrogen that can cause the consequences of estrogen replacement therapy, strokes, and cancers that we can sometimes see. So I can't emphasize enough how not to treat based on symptoms. Yes, diagnose based on symptoms, but do not treat based on symptoms. So what do you do when your blood work's normal and you have the symptoms? What you do is you start to realize that blood work is not the place to look. We run into this constantly in medicine where we keep testing people for things with blood work and we keep finding that everything is fine. Or we'll find things that are non-specific, like it's a little abnormal, but it's not enough to diagnose something. And so we just write it off and tell the person that we can't find anything wrong. It's time that we start to realize that maybe we're looking in the wrong place. So again, I did a podcast, I believe it's called Lies Your Blood Work Tells You, where we talked extensively about why blood work does not tell you the truth about why you have symptoms. And the reason for that is also physiology, your blood circulation is very protected by your body. So even though there's bedlam going on, you're having hot flashes, night sweats, you're gaining weight, you have insomnia, you have anxiety, you have mood swings, your periods are irregular, even though all that chaos is going on, your blood work is designed to be normal by your body because your blood is what's circulating things to your heart and lungs, which are the two most critical systems that your body prefers or prioritizes when all hell is breaking loose. And the system that makes absolutely certain that your heart and lungs will get everything they need is your bloodstream. So your body will systems that it doesn't think are important for your immediate survival when it's running out of resources, when it's out of balance for some reason, when your metabolism's off, when it otherwise senses that something is wrong, your body will automatically turn on these fight or flight responses that are going to prioritize your heart and lung with your bloodstream and deprioritize the cells that are actually causing your symptoms. So it's the fact that your ovaries are not getting what they need that are creating your symptoms. Your ovaries should still be getting what they need until the age of 51 and a half. Even then, we'll talk about later why there's a whole other system in your body that's still supposed to keep making your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone even after your ovaries stop functioning at menopause. So at no point in life should we be having symptoms of estrogen deficiency or progesterone deficiency or even testosterone deficiency if that other backup system is still functioning. And that is the adrenal system. It is the system that handles your stress. So perimenopause and menopause symptoms are actually due to the adrenal system not functioning well, not functioning properly, and not keeping up with supporting the estrogen, the progesterone, the testosterone that it should be making even after the ovaries are programmed to stop functioning around the time of menopause. And so again, this is something that's quite shocking to my clients. When we do salivary hormone testing, we look at the adrenal system and the ovarian system and their combined functions. The ovaries make your estrogen, your progesterone, and your testosterone, but in a cyclical fashion. So they're not always making estrogen, progesterone, and this is for the purpose of reproduction. Now, when reproduction is coming to an end, which is the onset of menopause, the ovaries stop cycling, and so they pretty much go dormant. There's another system, the adrenal system, is constantly making estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone at all times, unless you're under stress. Now, when you're under stress, the adrenal system has a choice to make. It's like a fork in the road. So it's either going to keep making your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone because everything's fine and there's no chronic stress, or it's going to divert all of its focus into fight or flight, start cranking out adrenaline, cortisol, and running the fight or flight responses while again it's prioritizing with your bloodstream the heart and the lungs. So when you look at the blood work, you draw someone's blood and you send it to a lab, they're looking at that protected environment, that protected bloodstream. You have to do saliva testing to get a better sense of the cells that are being shortchanged by the adrenal system deciding that it needs to focus on fight or flight and not on making the other hormones, the estrogen, the progesterone, and the testosterone. It can't do both at the same time. It has to pick one or the other. Again, it's like flipping a coin. It's either going to land on heads, I make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone if I'm the adrenal system because I'm not in fight or flight, or tails, I gotta stop making estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone and come focus on survival over here because something is wrong. I have to prioritize the heart and the lungs. So this is why we get hot flashes and night sweats because now the adrenal system is not making the estrogen, it's not making the progesterone, it's not making the testosterone. So when it decides I need to go into fight or flight mode because my brain is signaling to me that something is wrong, one of the systems I'm going to deprioritize if I'm the adrenal system is the ovaries. And so they're going to get shut down too. And by the way, so does your thyroid get shut down, your gut, your immune system, your liver, your hair follicles, your skin cells, your musculoskeletal tissues, your bones, your muscles. They all get deprioritized. In other words, they don't get the same complement of resources that your heart and lungs get. And this is where the symptoms come from. It's these deprioritized cells that are creating perimenopause and menopause symptoms. And it's because of the adrenal system having to make decisions based on whether or not it perceives us to be in fight or flight. Now, chronic stress is going to make the adrenal system perceive itself to be in fight or flight mode. And the adrenal system will not stop pumping out cortisol and managing fight or flight if we don't break the cycle. This is why, even when we treat menopause with just hormones, women still tend to get chronic diseases down the road. They still get the heart disease, the diabetes, the high blood pressure. They still get the high cholesterol, and they still gain the weight. Now, they might sleep better. And of course, there's a lot to be said for not having hot flashes and night sweats. I've been through that myself. So I totally get it. It's miserable. You can't sleep, you can't focus. Like it's a nightmare, right? You like have a fan with you everywhere you're going. It's crazy. But again, it's because of stress. And if you saw my podcast, Why Women Have to Work Harder to Stay Healthier, you'll remember that as biological women, we are not biologically designed for this chaos of the modern world. Now, we're handling it extremely well, right? We're still here. We're still doing all the things we need to do, showing up the way we need to show up. But it's costing us on the back end. We have more chronic diseases than men. We get worn out by stress a lot more easily than men because our biology is not designed for this constant fight or flight that our bodies seem to think we're in all the time. And so this is what's so critical for women to know. The blood work's not going to show you what you're looking for because it's not designed to. It's really good for showing us when we have a disease, if we have diabetes, if we've had a heart attack. The blood work will show that. Technically, blood work isn't even supposed to be used to diagnose menopause. Follicle stimulating hormone above 25 is used to clinically support the idea that someone's in menopause, but it is not diagnostic. The diagnosis of menopause is technically the absence of your menstrual cycle for 12 months in a row. That's the definition of menopause. It doesn't include the night sweats, the hot flashes, the insomnia, the anxiety, the weight gain, the mood swings. Like none of that is part of the definition of menopause. Nature isn't that cruel, right? So it's not built into nature to have us suffer like that. However, again, nature did not create this modern lifestyle and this insanity. Again, 80,000 chemicals in the air, stress like we've never seen it before in our particular lifetimes. We have to be extremely cautious in how we move through this environment, making sure that we are really tending to ourselves first. That's where the self-care, the self-love comes in. I got to take care of me first. Then I get to take care of everybody else. And also understanding that blood work is going to tell me why I don't feel well. So it's not that the doctor's a male or a female. The blood work's the blood work, right? So it's the blood work is normal. That's the situation, right? It's supposed to be normal. It doesn't show up there. Why saliva? Studies are showing very clearly now that saliva testing is what should be the gold standard to measure hormone levels in women. And yes, your hormone levels will fluctuate. That's true. If you test your hormones on a Monday, they're going to be different than if you test them on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. If you test them after a weekend and you got plenty of sleep, they're going to be different. So yes, there is fluctuation. However, we can get a really good sense of where they're hovering, right? If it's low normal and you're having hot flashes, that tells us something. If it's high normal and you're having hot flashes, that tells us something, right? It doesn't have to be like out of range for us to interpret that. Saliva testing helps us to see what's going on a cellular level, and that's the big difference between saliva testing and blood work. So if you're looking for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, which is the anti-stress hormone made in the adrenal system, and if you're looking for cortisol levels, you will not find abnormalities in your blood work the vast majority of the time. And if you do find abnormalities in your blood work, that means they're really bad in your cells and they've been really bad a long time. That's when it finally spills into the bloodstream and your body can't even maintain that normality that it wants to maintain in your bloodstream anymore. When we're looking for the symptoms of menopause, insomnia. So insomnia is managed by the gut-brain axis, right? That manages our sleep and wake cycles. Well, both of those are suppressed under chronic stress. So again, if I'm an adrenal gland and someone's under stress and there's all this chaos around me, I'm going to say, all right, I got to go into fight or flight. I have to ignore the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, put all these other systems to bed because we don't use them under stress. And we're going to focus on the heart and lungs and the fight or flight system only. So that means I'm putting my immune system to bed, putting my thyroid to bed. I'm putting my gastrointestinal system to bed. I'm putting my brain to bed. Even the brain is not a top priority. There's a small part of your brain that's massively important to your body under fight or flight. And that's the very tiny piece of your brain in the center that makes sure that your heart and lungs are functioning. The rest of your brain, your body could care less about. So if I'm an adrenal gland and stress is hitting me, I'm shutting down unessential functions in my brain. Now, again, that doesn't mean I'm shutting them off. Like the switch doesn't just turn off, but I'm not sending a proper amount of nutrients and oxygen and blood to the non-essential portions of my brain. And we know that this happens, right? This is physiology. Like, this isn't something we have to go study and figure out. Like, every physiology textbook tells us this. It's just that we don't apply it in medicine. We make these assumptions that everything's always firing on all cylinders until it's broken. And that's just not the case. The reason it breaks is because it was getting deprioritized for so long. And it's not shut off entirely. Your thyroid doesn't completely stop working, but it's suppressed. So in other words, it might be going at 25% capacity, 30, 40% capacity, but not 100. We don't use the thyroid and the adrenal system at the same time. We can't. So it's one or the other. We don't make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone at the same time as we're in fight or flight. We can't. It's one or the other. And so again, it doesn't mean that your ovaries get totally turned off. It just means they get suppressed. Again, they're firing on 25, 30, 40% capacity, but not 100. This is where the night sweats come in. This is where the hot flashes come in. This is where the insomnia comes in. The gut is being suppressed. The brain is being suppressed. This is why we get forgetful during perimenopause. We have brain fog because not our entire brain is firing on all cylinders when the adrenal system has to make the decision that it's in fight or flight and it needs to maintain that. And again, remember, the adrenal system will not turn off the fight or flight response until it is convinced it is safe. And that has a ton to do with your breathing and what your body perceives to be available to it. If you are low on hormones because you've been in chronic stress for so long, your body perceives that as a threat because that's not supposed to happen. Estrogen is not just for reproduction. There are estrogen receptors on every single tissue of your body, from your brain, your eyes, your heart. Your lungs require estrogen, your gut requires estrogen, your immune system requires estrogen, your muscles, your bones. There's no tissue in your body that doesn't rely on estrogen to function. Same with testosterone, same with thyroid. So when those systems that make those hormones are being suppressed, this is what causes the symptoms. So if we're not looking at those tissues, we're not going to find out what's going on. So if you're not looking at the level of the ovaries and the adrenals to find out what's going on during perimenopause, you're never going to find out. It's not that your hormones are normal, it's that they're normal where we're looking. We have to look somewhere else to find them abnormal. And that is what saliva testing allows us to see. Also, you can't test the adrenals with blood work. Your body knows I had better get cortisol to my heart and lungs or I'm going to die. That's it. Like, there's no other conversation that your body has with itself, so to speak. So it's going to suck the life out of every other cell in your body and take the cortisol and send it to your heart before it allows your heart not to get the cortisol because it knows you're going to have a heart attack if that happens. So again, we have to look at the tissues that should have cortisol in them to know if our cortisol levels are normal. And also to know if they're too high, right? Because hot flashes can be due to high cortisol as well as low estrogen or high estrogen or low progesterone or high thyroid. We want to look at that level so that we can get a really good sense of what's going on. And while hormone levels may fluctuate in your bloodstream, when we check salivary hormone testing, yes, there will be some fluctuations from day to day, but they'll be close enough that we can make some really good clinical decisions about whether or not you need estrogen replacement therapy or progesterone or testosterone, or if it's your adrenals, in fact, that are really the actual problem. And usually that is the case. It's usually that it's the adrenals that are malfunctioning that is the cause of the menopause and the perimenopause symptoms. To stabilize the adrenal system first, then address the other hormones that it's not making. So in other words, if you have low DHEA, that can cause insomnia. That can cause anxiety as well. Or if your cortisol is too high, that can cause insomnia. That can cause anxiety. Or if your cortisol is too low, that can also cause anxiety and insomnia. If your cortisol is too low, not only will you feel anxiety when your cortisol is too low, you'll feel like you can't ever get it to stop. When cortisol is too high, people at least have a sense that they can handle the stress. When the cortisol drops too low inside your cells, people get the sense that they can't handle it anymore. That's when they want to go find the rock to crawl under because they just can't keep pushing through anymore. So you still get the same symptom, regardless of if it's too low or too high. So that's why it's critically important to test. And it's critically important to test in the right place. And again, this is not done in regular medicine. We are very dogmatic in Western or allopathic medicine. Once we have a standard, it's going to take, multiple miracles to move that standard and to change it to something else. So again, this is where integrative functional medicine comes in. And frankly, even within the field of integrative and functional medicine, there are two camps. So there's the camp that still buys into the blood work as the standard, and then there's the camp that no longer buys into the blood work and does cellular and what we call functional testing. And again, don't get fooled by the panels that offer you 200 and 300 blood tests. They still come back normal or non-specific. Like it's not the right place to look for the thing that we're trying to find. So whether you do one test or 1,000 tests in the wrong place doesn't matter. You just need a few tests in the right place to get your answer. And again, I see this all the time. Like, I wanted to reach through the screen, and tap this woman on the shoulder and say, I know what's going on. Like, I can support. But of course, I don't know her. But this is the story that the vast majority of my clients tell me when they come in with these perimenopause symptoms. And believe me, I've had people think they're in perimenopause in their 20s. You just went through puberty. Like, there's no way you're in perimenopause at the age of 29. It's not possible. So, in fact, what it is stress. So we should call menopause stressopause, right? That's what I called it in my book, Faith. I did a whole chapter on menopause. It's the stress that we endure before menopause comes that leads to the insanity that we call menopause now. Traditional Chinese medicine has an amazing way that it describes menopause that helps us to really understand why everything goes haywire a decade before menopause starts. In traditional Chinese medicine, we understand that menopause is a time of transition where the liver is actually very heavily involved. So the liver is extremely involved in menstrual cycling. So stress impacts the liver directly, according to TCM, or traditional Chinese medicine. Menopause and menstruation are very intimately tied into the liver. So when we're having a menstrual cycle, the liver is most active the week before our menstrual cycle. We call premenstrual. And again, we were all familiar with the PMS symptoms, right? And so it's like a mini menopause, once a month that women are going through. Now, when menopause comes, it becomes a prolonged PMS, right? So we start to call this PMS that doesn't go away menopause, but it's the same causes of PMS that get us during the time of the menopause transition. When we're about to menstruate, the liver, which is supposed to control the flow of energy. So the liver manages the direction of energy flow in the body. So for example, our lungs, the chi of our lungs is supposed to flow downward. And if it's reversed, we might cough, for example. The energy of the stomach is supposed to flow downwards. But if we have a reversal of that, we might vomit, have hiccups, belching. If the liver is stressed or stagnant, then it might reverse the flow of qi in an organ. The week before our menstrual cycle, the liver is also very heavily involved because it's preparing to move our blood down and out for a menstrual cycle. If we actually get pregnant, the energy is not going to move down and out. It's actually going to go up and in to be held so that a fetus can develop if conception occurs. So it's either going to be up and held or down and out, depending on whether or not conception occurs. So the liver is there, like literally managing the energy flow based on what's going on. Now, when there's a lot of chronic stress and the liver becomes stagnant because it's not supposed to experience chronic stress, this is where PMS happens. So instead of this nice organized flow of energy, we get this kind of outward erratic flow of energy. So this is where we get that premenstrual bloating. It can cause breast tenderness. It can cause mood instability, right? Especially if there's heat being caused by the stagnation. So when there's stagnation of liver qi, i.e. stress, it's like friction. The stagnation, the energy's trying to move, but it can't move because it's stagnant. So it's like friction, and whenever there's friction, there will be heat generated. And so this is what can cause insomnia. This is what can cause agitation, mood swings, anxiety. So again, all these PMS symptoms are eerily similar to perimenopause symptoms, except they're no longer isolated to the week before our menstrual cycle. They kind of spill into the whole month. This is due to stress. The liver is so inundated with stress that it can't even cycle through and do what it needs to do. It's just off all month. Now we begin to think that we have perimenopause and not just PMS. But again, it's not perimenopause. It's stress. It's the maladaptation of your body to stress, or the inability of your body to handle the stress. Now, as we move through time, so let's say this starts in our, mid 40s, and now time is ticking and we're getting closer and closer to 51 and a half. Menopause doesn't get to not show up because your body is in chaos, right? It's going to happen come hell or high water. It's a genetically timed event. So there's nothing that's going to stop it from happening. So now this wall of chaos is moving towards a fixed point, right, that has to happen. Now, in menopause, TCM explains that chi is the energy that moves the blood. So, as the liver is moving the blood down and out for a menstrual cycle, when menopause comes, it has to literally do a 180 and actually send the blood, instead of down and out, up. In traditional Chinese medicine, we say that now the blood is going into the heart. The time of menopause is supposed to be a very joyful time, a time of increased wisdom in women. Not that we're not wise before menopause, but we become even wiser at the time of menopause. However, if the liver is stagnant, if there's been a lot of chronic stress, or if the liver is depleted, right? So there can be like liver blood deficiency, or even what we call liver deficiency, where the stress has been so ongoing and so chronic that the liver is not just stagnant, it's depleted and stagnant. And so now we have to do this energetic 180. And if the liver is not in full control, it's not going to be a 180, it's going to be chaos. And that is, again, perimenopause colliding with menopause. Your body has to undergo these changes. So menopause is a genetic transition. So we're turning off a bunch of genes, having to turn on a bunch of other genes to make this transition. And again, if the environment where those genes are living are not healthy, all hell is going to break loose. Right? And this is why menopause is also known to be a time when women are diagnosed with more and more diseases. Heart disease, women start to have heart attacks at alarming levels at the time of the menopause transition. Cancer diagnoses go up around this time. Again, it's not because of menopause, it's because of the impact of stress on the body and the wear and tear over time, where it has been just relentlessly wearing the body down. And all of a sudden, all of this transformation has to take place. And if the body is not in a state where it can tolerate that, if your metabolism is not in a place where it can tolerate all that rapid change that's starting to happen, it's just going to fall apart. And this is what we're calling menopause, but it's not. It's just that it's timed around that same time. That's why we think it's menopause, but it's not. It's stress. And in TCM, they say this. They say that the decade before the menopause transition dictates how rocky that menopause transition will be. Stress destabilizes your body and wears down metabolism, creates inflammation, creates toxins. So all of this is going on at the same time as menopause. And so, of course, menopause is not going to be smooth. Menopause is a state of life that is supposed to happen at the age of 51 and a half. And we're not supposed to know it's happening until our menstrual cycles like vanish for a year. That's the only sign we should have. Now, obviously, that's not the case for the 80-90% of women, because we're all swimming in the same cesspool. Myth number one is that perimenopause is a thing. It's not. It's not supposed to be. It is actually stress masquerading as perimenopause. Myth number two is that blood work should show you everything that's wrong. It won't. It just won't. It's not designed to. Studies have shown that salivary hormone testing is 90 to 95% accurate to show us what's going on in the adrenal system, whereas blood work is not. It'll almost always be normal when there's all hell broken loose in the adrenal system. Myth number three, hormones will fix everything. That's another myth. So hormones may patch you up for a while. They won't fix everything by themselves. Now, they're probably an integral part of managing the symptoms, but they're not the only piece of the puzzle that's missing. So while it's essential to help women manage their symptoms, the hot flashes, the night sweats, They're extremely distressful, the anxiety. But if we don't look at the adrenal system and if we don't work on the stress piece of the puzzle, this is where, despite the hormone replacement therapy, you're still going to get sick down the road. And the type of hormone replacement therapy that you take matters. So we're going to talk a little bit about regular hormones, if you will, versus bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. But first, let's talk about why hormones alone are not the fix. So because stress is actually the root cause of perimenopause and menopause symptoms and PMS. So PMS is just limited to a week. Perimenopause is like every day. And then menopause, it just gets even worse every day. But it's the same root. It's stress and how the body is handling or mishandling, we should say, stress. So if we don't look at that from two different perspectives, right? One is to look at the system that manages stress with the salivary hormone testing to see what condition the adrenal system is in. And again, usually it's unstable, right? So again, there is fluctuation in the adrenal system. So you might find it low when you test it one time, normal when you test it another time. And I'm talking about just cortisol. So cortisol will vary depending on the level of stress. It's designed to go up and down as needed. So when we test it, we expect to see it going up and down. But it should never be too low, right? It just should never be too low. It should at least be normal to high. Your DHEA also should never be low. We should never see that happen. Regardless of fluctuations that we expect, having your DHEA and cortisol be too low is not one of them. Now, when the cortisol is low and the DHEA is low, we know that system's completely wiped out. And again, that will not show up in your blood work. It just won't because your body knows better. Your body is designed to open and close its capillaries at will so that it can send flow one place and avoid another place if it wants to. Now, what dictates that is whether or not it feels threatened. And again, we see really good examples of this like in medical dramas on TV, right? We have the traumatic car accident where someone is bleeding and we see like they do the makeup, they do all the things to make you see that that individual is extremely pale, their lips are blue, and they're going to pass out. And that's an instantaneous response that your body has to acute stress. Like this is acute life-threatening stress. I'm bleeding damn near to death. I better do something. It instantly closes all of the capillaries and the blood flow to the extremities and even to the abdominal organs. Everything instantly just goes right here. It just stays right here, right? So it doesn't necessarily go up to your whole brain. So you're not going to be able to maintain your blood pressure and you're going to lose consciousness. You're going to pass out. When you're horizontal, your body has a much easier time getting blood to your brainstem that controls your heart and lungs. So we're kind of designed to pass out if we're bleeding excessively to the point where it's life-threatening. But we see, like, this is known in medicine, like it's a known thing. It's not a big shock. Like everything is shunted instantly to the chest, heart, lungs, center of your brain. Everything else is ignored. Like, so your limbs go numb, pale, your lips turn blue. Your body does that on purpose so you don't die. We compare that to someone who has a slow bleed. For example, someone that has a diagnosed colon cancer, for example, and they're just bleeding very slowly through the colon. So it's not visible in their stools. So they don't know they're bleeding, but they've had the cancer perhaps for several years. And on a routine annual checkup, we might see that their blood counts are extremely low, just as low as the person that had the traumatic car accident and that was acutely bleeding in a life-threatening way. So a super low hemoglobin would be something like 6, for example, right? Should be around 14, 15, 12 for women. If you just had a car accident and your hemoglobin's at 6, we know that you're massively bleeding somewhere. But you can have the same hemoglobin from an undiagnosed colon cancer and be walking around maybe a little tired, dizzy, on an occasion, but not like super sick like the person that had the car accident. And you might have that same 6 hemoglobin. So your body has had time to slowly start moving its resources around to maintain like 2 wrongs equal a right all over the place so that it still can operate despite having such a low blood count. So we know this happens. So it's not a big stretch to know that stress also does this because it's the stress response that's managing both situations. It's the stress response that kicks in when you have the acute car accident and the bleeding out situation. It's the same stress response that's kicking in when you have the colon cancer and the slow bleed that's undetectable. It's the same stress response. It's just the system has to work way faster when it's an acute life-threatening bleed versus it's got plenty of time when it's a slow bleed. But it's still stress managing that whole thing in both scenarios. So you don't have to be bleeding for that to happen. You just have to be under stress. We know that the body can dictate who's going to get its full complement of nutrients and who's not. Like that's a known thing. It's just we don't apply it because we don't get to see it in blood work, and blood work is the gold standard. So if it's not there, it must not exist, right? Like we somehow forget that we studied this in medical school because now we're looking at blood work trying to diagnose a disease. Functional medicine restores physiology. That's why it's called functional. Like we're restoring the function that is lost to the chronic stress. So in order to do that, you have to look at the systems that are being shortchanged. And those are the systems where the body is not sending the proper nutrients, enough oxygen, enough blood flow, enough hormones to, because it doesn't have them to spare because of all the years and years of chronic stress. Even the adrenal system starts running out of resources, right? That's when we'll see the DHEA low and the cortisol low in the adrenal system. Now, it won't be zero, it'll just be below normal levels. And whatever little bit it has, guess where it's going to send it, right? Your heart and lungs, they're going to get everything. And the rest of you, not so much, right? We know that cortisol has extremely important functions to our body. Without a spike of cortisol in the morning, the rest of our body doesn't get to wake up. So if you have low cortisol and you don't have that morning spike, that means your metabolism's not flowing through your whole body. And we know that stress has been present for a long time when we see a picture like that. When we see the low DHEA and normal cortisol, we also know it's been going on for a long time and it's falsely normal on its way down if we don't do something. And we might see it high still with low DHEA, right? So again, that person will still have a lot of symptoms, but they won't be able to recover as well because the DHEA is not there to buffer the cortisol. So DHEA is the anti-cortisol, if you will, or the anti-stress hormone. We also call it the anti-aging hormone. It runs around behind the cortisol and fixes all the mess that the cortisol creates. But your body would rather give up on making DHEA before it gives up on making cortisol. So this is why we see the DHEA drop first before we see the cortisol drop. So depending on where on the spectrum you are in terms of adrenal disorders, you want to take supplements that will help support the adrenal system. So that's an essential part of menopause that's almost completely ignored by the medical community. Again, I did a podcast on the adrenals where we talked in detail about the type of supplements that would be prescribed based on the level of the adrenal dysfunction that we see. So you got to get the adrenal system supported. So you might need DHEA replacement even more so than estrogen. Sometimes if I'll see a low DHEA and cortisol is normal or high, we'll prescribe the proper adrenal supplements, but we'll replace DHEA and see if that will support the estrogen production without having to take estrogen. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. So there may not be a lot left over to go and make estrogen out of. And so we might add estrogen on top of that. And of course, you never want to just have your estrogen replaced without your progesterone also being replaced. So, and that's regardless of whether or not you've had a hysterectomy. Like that's another myth that women who've had a hysterectomy don't need progesterone. That's not true. How do we know? Progesterone receptors are everywhere on your body. There are, again, hundreds of body functions that have nothing to do with reproduction that require progesterone. And progesterone is used to make cortisol and a lot of your other hormones as well. So a lot of these hormones can be converted into each other. So DHEA can become testosterone, DHEA can become estrogen, progesterone can become cortisol. And so there's a lot of intermingling with these hormones that are really important to understand, but never ever take estrogen without progesterone. It's extremely important, regardless of whether or not you still have a uterus. So not only does your body need the progesterone to function, it also needs to be there to balance the estrogen, just like the DHEA needs to be there to balance the cortisol. So it's like they're like yin and yang hormones, right? So there has to always be this balance. And we look for specific numbers, right? So there should be 200 times more progesterone than estrogen for proper balance. There needs to be 6 times more DHEA than cortisol for proper balance. And then testosterone, which is frankly, rarely low in women. Women often think that their testosterone is going to be low when they have a low libido, for example, and the vast majority of the time it's normal. Usually their fatigue, their low libido is due to the DHEA being low, plus minus the cortisol potentially also being low, and also potentially some GI issues that we've covered in other podcasts as well. That's another big part of properly treating menopause. And then managing your stress, doing the things that will help the body get itself out of the fight or flight responses is critical. So breath work, again, the four pillars of wellness: eat, move, rest, and detox. Those are essential during menopause and perimenopause because they help build resiliency against stress. And that's really important. It's the loss of resiliency against stress that creates the vicious circle that leads to the chronic diseases that come as a result of the chaos that women go through during that time in their lives. The other essential reason that hormones alone do not fix everything is not just that we have to also support the adrenal system and build resiliency against stress. It's also that nutrient deficiencies are heavily involved in hormone imbalances that we also experience as perimenopause symptoms. So studies have shown that several vitamins and minerals are heavily involved with hormone synthesis, balance, such as B5, B6, B12, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and similarly, not just the production and balance of hormones, but the elimination of hormones is extremely important. This is where the nutrients are so important as well. It's not just that vitamin B6 influences your estrogen levels and other B vitamins influence your progesterone levels. It's also how your cells can get rid of the hormones when they're done doing their work. So the purpose of a hormone is to serve as a blueprint. It tells your body what to do. So it's like an instruction manual or a blueprint to build a house or a recipe, to make some food. So just like you could sit the recipe down on your kitchen counter and walk away, it's not going to make the food for you, right? You have to get the ingredients, mix it the way that the recipe tells you to do it, cook it at the right temperature for the right time. All of that is what your hormones are telling your body to do, but it's not helping them do it at all. That's what hormones do. So now your cell has to respond. So just like you have to respond to the recipe, I go to the grocery store, buy the ingredients, chop them up, mix it all together, set the oven temperature, make sure you don't burn it, which is my biggest thing that I do is I'm constantly burning things. So yeah, this is what we have to do if we want the recipe to come out right. Then we have to clean up the mess, right? So once the food's all cooked, if you didn't burn it, you get to eat it. Now you have to clean up. So inside the cell, what's going on is, let's say, for example, estrogen comes in and it starts barking orders at your cells. Your cells then have to turn around and go turn on proper genes. That's going to require vitamins, minerals to do that with. It's going to require that it make proteins. It's going to require fats to do that. This is where your metabolism comes in, right? So the hormone comes into the cell. Now you have to run your metabolism. The cell has to run its metabolism and do the thing the hormone is telling it to do. Make the thing that the hormone is telling it to make. Send it to wherever it needs to go. Now the hormone's in the cell. Now the cell has to get rid of the hormone because it's done the work. The estrogen can't just sit there. It has to be sent out. It can't be just sent out as the way it came in, because then it's going to go and influence another cell, and you don't want that. It has to repackage it, send it out, send it to the liver. The liver is going to capture the estrogen, reshape it, again, change it so that it's in a configuration that your kidneys will recognize as waste. So it comes out through the urine. All of that requires vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats, carbs, antioxidants to do. Otherwise, that estrogen gets trapped in your cell. And this is where the levels go up and the estrogen becomes toxic. Also, if your cell doesn't get to change the estrogen into the right configuration, your liver can take it up, and then your liver doesn't change it into the right configuration so that your kidney can take it up and remove it in the urine, it's going to recirculate back into your body as toxic estrogen. And that's extremely dangerous. And that's actually what causes the side effects and problems of hormone replacement therapy, the increased risks of cancers and strokes that we see, is if the cells didn't get to repackage that estrogen into a safe form and it's spilled back out into the body instead of going out through the urine. And so this is why birth control pills are toxic after several years of use. This is why the classically prescribed hormone replacement therapy, such as Prempro, that was studied back in 2001 and again in 2004, were shown to be toxic. It's because these hormones are already in a toxic form when we take them in. In other words, they're not in a natural form, in a natural state that your body would have made them in. So this poses a huge stress to your body because now the liver has to process that and try and like detoxify it, if that makes sense. And inside your cells, what's going to happen there is your cells are extremely precise. Like they're going to follow that recipe like word for word all the way down the page. So if the recipe comes in as the wrong recipe, which is what artificial hormones are, they're the wrong recipe. So you might have, let's say a recipe has 15 ingredients, and instead of the last 5 being correct, someone switched them out for something else that's not part of the recipe. You're going to get something that sort of kind of looks like the food you were supposed to have, but it's going to taste a little funny. It's going to smell a little funny, maybe. It may or may not be edible. Your cells are going to do exactly the same thing. So if that hormone comes in and it's not exactly estrogen, if it's changed a little bit, which is what an artificial estrogen is, it's like 90% the same as estrogen and 10% a little off. Your body doesn't understand 10% a little off. It's going to do whatever that 10% a little off tells it to do. Just like if you get the recipe and the last 5 ingredients are wrong and you don't know any better, you're going to make it the way it is. The cells do that too. They don't discriminate. They don't understand because it's not something that's found in nature. So your body isn't designed to be like, wait, that's not real estrogen. I'm not gonna listen to that. Like it doesn't know how to do that. It's just gonna follow it wrong. The reason there's a lag, the reason that we don't see the cancer and strokes for several years when we're on artificial hormones is because it's just doing a little bit wrong every day. It's not doing things that are catastrophically wrong. So you're just going to have a little bit off and a little bit more off and a little bit more off. And it's just going to slowly get worse and worse and worse over time until the breaking point. And then that's when the cancer gets triggered, or that's when the stroke happens. The same thing can happen with your own hormone. So even people not on any hormone replacement therapy can have their own hormones not be broken down properly, have them recirculating in toxic form, and then we get the same result, the stroke, the heart attack. Making sure that your body is properly nourished so it has all those nutrients available to it so that it can follow the recipe that the hormone is telling it to do and get rid of the hormone properly when it's time to get rid of it. Hormones are like disposable, one use and gone. Like you don't want to be reusing your hormones. That's not safe. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone not use birth control, so please don't get me wrong. Birth control is a lesser of evils thing that we do so that we don't get pregnant unintentionally. At the age at which we are using birth control, it's usually not immediately detrimental, but it is something to think about. And you can balance your hormones around the birth control pill so that your body still has normal hormonal function despite having toxic hormones in it. And you can still also make sure that your nutrients are being properly supplied so that the body is better equipped to deal with the artificial hormones more consistently so that it doesn't decompensate and fall apart over time. So again, this is where getting cellular levels of nutrients is so important because guess what? Your blood work will not show vitamin and mineral deficiency until they're pretty severe. Now, vitamin D, for some reason, correlates really well with cellular levels in the blood work. Other than vitamin D, there is really no other nutrient that I've experienced that is on par with cellular testing. Your bloodstream will be very protective of its nutrients because it wants to have plenty to send to the heart and lungs so that they function despite the chaos going on in the rest of you. So it's the same thing. We look on a cellular level for the nutrient levels so that we get more accurate vitamin and mineral levels. And if you do have a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies, you probably have a gastrointestinal issue that you'll want to get checked out. Again, I have lots of podcasts on gastrointestinal issues that people experience, so feel free to check them out as well. So making sure that your body is equipped and ready to take in the hormones, use them, and then properly eliminate them is extremely important. And I usually work on that first with my clients before we go to the next step of actually providing the hormones. Now that's where conversation between the conventional hormone replacement therapy, which is typically more likely to be artificial, versus bioidentical hormones come in. Now, there are some bioidentical hormones you can get at a regular pharmacy. They're just limited in terms of their doses. So many of the estrogen patches, the estradiol patches that you can get at a pharmacy are technically bioidentical. What bioidentical means is it looks identical to your own hormones. So human hormones have a very distinct configuration or a very distinct chemical structure about them that artificial hormones don't have. So again, they'll be 90% the same and 10% off. And that matters. That's the difference between being healthy and having a stroke or getting cancer. So bioidenticals are 100% exactly the same. And that's what makes them safer. Just like your own hormones are safe, right? Nature doesn't make toxic things. The estrogen that nature designed us to make is safe. And if we make a hormone, we construct a hormone that looks exactly the same, then that too should be safe. Bioidentical hormones are typically made from yam. Yes, they are synthesized in a lab because that has to be converted to the same configuration as a human hormone, but it is natural. Fillers matter too. So if you're taking, especially if you're taking a transdermal cream, which I do recommend for estrogen, like you never, ever, ever want to take estrogen or testosterone by mouth. Anything you take by mouth, any food, any medication, any hormone that you would take by mouth goes to your liver first after it's digested and absorbed by your body. And so your liver gets this big surge of hormones that it has to deal with. Using hormones as a cream or even like an oil or even an injection bypasses the gut and takes the pressure off the liver. When you take a transdermal, what you're doing is you're having it go through your cells first, then to your liver. So we actually see that we use much lower doses when we're dosing out transdermals. Transdermals means it's the cream you rub on your skin. You rub it on your thigh, not really your arm. I'm just doing that to demonstrate on the camera. But the inner thigh is a better place to put it. If you put it on a place that doesn't have enough fat, it gets rapidly absorbed. You don't want that. You want it to be slowly absorbed over time. So the inner thigh is a place where there's usually a cushion of fat so that it sits in the fat and it doesn't get absorbed so rapidly into the body. So we get to use lower doses. We're putting a lot less pressure on the liver, which is, remember, the main organ that causes all the symptoms that we relate to perimenopause and menopause. So the less pressure we put on it, the better off we're going to be. So even progesterone, you'll find that there are pharmacy grade, you can go to a regular pharmacy and get bioidentical progesterone as well. But the doses are very limited. So bioidentical progesterone that you would get in a pharmacy usually comes by the brand name of Prometrium, and it's only available in 100 and 200 milligram capsules. There is no patch for progesterone for hormone replacement therapy. So very often what we find, people are not absorbing very well during perimenopause. We don't see the proper hormone balance when we check their saliva levels, even when they're taking 200 milligrams of progesterone. And so very often I will prescribe transdermal progesterone just to avoid any GI issues that are so prevalent in the perimenopause and menopause time period. That way, we're bypassing the gut, we're bypassing the liver, we're not stressing them out more than they're already stressed, and we get to have hormone balance. And so what that does is that helps the hormones sneak in the back door of the gastrointestinal system and the liver in a more therapeutic way that actually helps support them. The other thing to be very mindful of is the fillers that your bioidenticals are being put into. Several years ago, the FDA intervened with compounding pharmacy. So bioidentical hormones, I should say this first, are compounded. They are made for you. So yes, you can get them in certain doses at a pharmacy. If you fall outside of that, there's no other dosing available. Also, it doesn't contain estriol, so it's just estradiol. Estradiol is the active estrogen. It's the one that physiologically does all the work of estrogen. It's the blueprint. And also you can get the Prometrium in a pharmacy, but again, it's only 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams. The other forms of progesterone that you get from a pharmacy are artificial, and certain forms of estrogen replacement therapy are also artificial. And so again, they are identified by your body as a toxin. And again, your body is not going to necessarily change what it does in response to that toxin. It's going to do the wrong work in response to the toxin. So taking hormones that are as natural as you can get them is most important. And then that brings us to the fillers. So again, the bioidenticals, if you're not getting them from a regular pharmacy, are actually made for you. So if you need transdermal progesterone or transdermal estrogen or testosterone, that gets sent to what we call a compounding pharmacy, and the pharmacist will make it according to the physician's prescription. So we can be very precise with the dosing that we want to deliver into the cells of the body. And then you want to make sure that the levels are monitored. It takes at least 2 weeks, preferably 3 to 4 weeks, to see the hormones equilibrate inside the cells so that we get accurate levels when we're monitoring those hormones. So once we prescribe a specific dose based on your initial levels, we want to make sure we check again in a couple of months and using salivary hormone testing, or sometimes we can then use capillary blood. So capillary blood is tissue levels around the cells. They're so close to the cells, they are what we call bioavailable. Bioavailable means they're available to the inside of the cell. They're available to be used by the cell. When we look at blood work hormones, what we're looking at is hormones that are what we call bound. So they're not available to go into the cell. So it's a mix of what's bioavailable and what's bound to proteins. What's bound to proteins in the bloodstream is not available to go into the cell. So it's like a storage closet, or a sponge that holds on to those hormones until they need to be released. So that's another reason blood work is not going to tell us the true story. So when we do capillary blood for hormones, or if we look at salivary hormone levels, we're going to see what we call bioavailable, available to the cells, functioning in the cells. So one of those two methods can be used for follow-up testing. It's not advised to use capillary level blood in the initial testing because we can't assess the adrenal system that way. So we always start with saliva. It takes quite some time to see the shifts from the adaptogens or the adrenal support that we might prescribe. So we don't have to keep doing the 4 points of saliva testing over and over again. We just do a morning finger stick or a morning saliva. The initial salivary testing has to be 4 times in one day, timed, so that we see the curve of cortisol. For the follow-ups, we don't need to do that. We just need to see the morning. That keeps it consistent. So we're always checking the same time of day so that we get the trend over time. That helps us to know that we're in the ballpark with the levels. Your body will take those hormones and start using them right away. So that means your cells get to start doing the function that they were not able to do if your levels were previously low. So that should result in you starting to feel better and the symptoms going away. Once we get a couple follow-ups and we know that, okay, the levels are not shifting very much, they're more or less stable, then we know, okay, that's your dose for this year. Then we check in a year. You always want to make sure that you get your levels checked at least once a year, because there are minor dose adjustments that need to be made from year to year because we're still lifing while all that is going on. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping up. So it's not a static dose that you end up with when you start having perimenopause symptoms that you stay on forever. You have to monitor. The other thing, the other myth about hormones is that you can only take them for 5 years and then you have to stop. That is true for artificial hormones because we know that after 5 years of use, the risk of cancer and stroke is so high that it's not safe to stay on them because of their toxicity. Bioidentical hormones, that doesn't apply to. So there are plenty of studies on bioidentical hormones. A lot of them were done abroad and have been done for over 30 years now, probably going on 40 actually, where we know they're much, much safer than artificial hormones. So as long as they're being properly monitored and broken down, hormone replacement therapy is complicated. You really have to see an expert to make sure that you're also assessing, am I breaking these hormones down properly, right? That's a urine test. So remember, we mentioned earlier that hormones go out of your body through your urine. So we can capture that and see, are the hormones going out in the proper forms? Or are you making toxic forms of estrogen that might be causing distress in your body? And if that's the case, you intervene, right? You want to make sure that you're leveling up your detoxification system, whether it's with nutrients, looking at what's going on with your gut to make sure you're absorbing the nutrients properly. You want to look for things like heavy metals, genetic predispositions to poor detoxification. All of these things can be tested for in functional medicine so that you optimize how you're breaking those hormones down so you're not increasing your risk over time. The studies are pretty clear on bioidentical hormones that they're much, much safer than artificial hormones. But just like your own hormones can turn against you if you're not detoxing and eliminating them properly, Bioidentical hormones can do the same. You do want to have that monitoring in place so that you're safely taking them. And then again, back to the fillers. There's so much to say. So the fillers matter. So when we prescribe those bioidenticals to the compounding pharmacy, we specify the fillers, or we should, I should say, specify the fillers that the pharmacy puts those hormones in, because those are just as important as the hormones themselves. You don't want them to be artificial and toxic fillers. And there are plenty of artificial and toxic fillers available on the market that many compounding pharmacies will use simply because they're cheaper. So you have to put on the prescription that you want very specific fillers used with the bioidenticals, because there's no point in taking a natural hormone if the fillers that they're coming in are toxic. So you want to make sure that you're seeking guidance from an expert who knows exactly all the things I just mentioned. And again, functional medicine or integrative medicine is where we do this type of testing, we do this type of management. So you want to see an integrative functional medical doctor who is very familiar with saliva testing and also urine testing. So with safe and proper monitoring, you can take bioidentical hormone therapy for the rest of your life if you choose to. Now, even if you don't take hormones, eventually the symptoms start to settle out, right? And so people think that, oh, I must be out of the woods if I don't have symptoms anymore, but that is not true. Your body does not like to be in distress. So when menopause is coming, it's like this tsunami coming at your metabolism, right? And so if your metabolism is weak, that tsunami just bowls it over, right? And again, all hell breaks loose. Now, your body will be diligently trying to fix all of that as much as it can. So even in the absence of you taking hormone replacement therapy, even in the absence of you taking the proper nutrients and making sure you're detoxing and all of those things, the symptoms will eventually get better. But that's not because everything's better. That's because your body found a way to twist itself into a pretzel so that it wouldn't be in that much distress anymore. So it made two wrongs equal a right all over the place just to patch everything up so that you are not in distress. But that doesn't mean everything's okay. It means that your metabolism settled into a dysfunctional place where at least it's not having these crazy symptoms happen anymore. But you're still at risk for diseases. But most people will feel some level of fatigue. They'll have some level of brain fog. Even if they don't have the hot flashes, the night sweats anymore, they'll still have some sleep challenges, anxiety, mood swings. So it's not that the symptoms completely go away, right? We start to normalize them after a while. Not so bad, right? If that's all I'm having as to the chaos I was having before. But that's still not normal. So even in the absence of symptoms, you still want to get assessed, because the same thing that manages your perimenopause and menopause symptoms properly also prevents diseases. It's the same spectrum. So for disease prevention, everything we just talked about is also extremely important. And so that's all the time we have for today's podcast. I hope you got a lot out of today. And if so, please share this with someone that you feel would be helped. Please like and subscribe to our channel. If you want to know about our Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program, which is the foundation to prevent the chaos that leads to the perimenopause and menopause diagnoses, check out our website, awakenedwellnessnow.com. We also have corporate burnout programs that you can also check out on our website. So again, thank you as always for listening. And until next time, many, many blessings. Thank you.